back. It's been so long since I've done one of these, but we had a hiatus because life, and because we had to kind of change my baking. That's the big thing. So what I'm showing you here, I'm holding these very long stalks of, this is rhubarb, fresh from our garden. Today we're going to make a Muir family favorite, rhubarb crunch. It has been handed down from my folks, and I used to love it all the time. Turns out Mr. SM is allergic to rhubarb. And the Muirlets are both need gluten-free. So it has been kind of like, well, when am I gonna make this? Plus this thing has, you know, Mr. SM is worried about diabetes, so this takes a lot of sugar. So we don't make this very often, but I wanted to show you, this is the rhubarb that we got out of our garden this morning, that you're going to end up chopping into little pieces to make, it says 3 cups of diced rhubarb. I'm thinking we got 3 cups here. It doesn't look it yet, but it will be. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just chop this up into kind of bite-sized pieces. With the big ones this big, we're gonna cut it down lengthwise and then chop it up. All right, because they're really too big. You wanna have bite-sized pieces for this dessert, because when it gets all baked together, you don't wanna be eating chunks of rhubarb like that. It's just, it's sour. This particular vegetable is very sour. So you want to have smaller pieces so you can mitigate the sour. So that's what we're gonna do, is we're just gonna chop these things up. Make sure you wash them really good if you get them out of your garden. And yeah, just chop them up until you get 3 cups of these things. All right, well, welcome back. We have chopped up the rhubarb. Ta-da! And you want, according to this recipe, you'll want 3 cups of this stuff. So to start off, you'll want 3 cups of rhubarb, chopped up. You'll want 1 cup of uncooked oatmeal, 1 cup of all-purpose flour. We are using the Bob's Red Mill gluten-free 1-to-1 baking flour. It could be baking, it could be bread flour, it doesn't matter. It's technically all-purpose. I didn't know we had the baking version. Usually we have the all-purpose. It doesn't matter. It's good flour for people that need gluten-free, and it works just fine. So you need a full cup of that. I will get full cup of the flour. So that's it. And then, now this is a family recipe. So my mom, you can see her writing. You see all this writing here? She said, add this to the flour and sugar and things like that. And you really do need, this time, you really do need a full cup of brown sugar, because rhubarb is very sour and bitter, all right? You need it to make this recipe taste okay, you need the full sugar. Usually I cut my recipes and I cut the sugar out. This time you actually do need the sugar. Okay, so she said add these different spices. So we got a half a teaspoon of salt. We have a teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, which are these little pieces that we scraped in there, and then a 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom and a 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. These are going to be mixed in. Yes, she gave me a little thing to mix these together, but they're going to be mixed into the rest of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to combine them in their little mixture of spices, and it's going to be very brown because there is a lot of cinnamon. More cinnamon than the other spices. Okay. So what you do is you put in the oatmeal, the flour, and the brown sugar. That just came out as a really nice chunk. And then you also add the spices, which, there you go, spices. Now, before you add the butter, because you're going to add the butter next, stir that around. See if you can break this into, that's going to be entertaining. Sorry. You kind of want your brown sugar to be soft. because otherwise it's going to be very, very crumbly. And this is what happens when the unexpected happens. You get a very large chunk of
a development happens.
Sometimes you have to do it manually. And that's okay. It's meant to happen that way.
Happy Pride to those who celebrate.
Yes, happy Pride. We are doing this in June. June being Pride Month, and we just celebrated the first annual Pride celebration in Cheyenne, Wyoming. That's pretty awesome. All right, I think
That's good enough.
is that good enough?
When they get heated up, they'll just melt, won't they?
I hope so. Otherwise, you're gonna have crunchy sugar.
Who doesn't love that?
Who does? Who doesn't love crunchy sugar? I don't know.
We do have hard candies, you know.
That's true. All right. That mixture, into that, you want to put a half a cup of butter. And the half a cup of butter you want to be somewhat hard, but not entirely, because you want to be able to use a pastry cutter to break the butter up into to chunks until the whole mixture is kind of crumbly. Just take it out. Okay, so I have this nifty cool tool. This is a pastry cutter. And what you do is you just kind of do this. And you kind of go back and forth and back and forth. And you want to mix the butter up into the whole thing, because you want to split it up into, make this kind of almost like a dry cake batter. It's kind of what you're doing. And it helps if the butter is somewhat soft, but not completely. You don't want it mushy, because you need it to be crumbly. But you don't want it so hard that you can't use the pastry cutter to cut it. This is what I'm talking about when it kind of a crumbly texture. You see, it's kind of crumbly. Not dusty, crumbly. Although there is still some unmixed stuff. But I think it'll be okay. All right, place half a mixture into an 8-inch square pan. And so we are using this one. All right, so we do half of this. Basically what you're trying to make with this rhubarb recipe is kind of like a bar. It's not gonna end up being like a bar, but you wanna have crust on the bottom and crust on the top. That's kind of what you're going for. So, you want half of it. That's about half, I think. And then what you do is you can use a tool if you want to, but the best thing is to just kind of pat everything in order and everything down until the entire bottom is covered, right? Real gentle, because it's gonna wanna slide everywhere. It's crumbly. So it looks like that. Okay, now, this is where the magic happens. And then the magic happens. You need half a cup of granulated sugar, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a pinch of salt, or 1/8 of a teaspoon. I usually just throw salt in there. And a tablespoon of water. It doesn't have to be hot or cold, just water. And 3 cups of chopped rhubarb. Now this is why, the reason you need this much sugar, the cup in the crust and in the rhubarb, is because this stuff is really sour. Like if you like Sour Patch Kids, this is your jam. But that's why it requires so much sugar.
1 cup or half a cup?
Half a cup. Half a cup of granulated white sugar. Like I said, a pinch of salt, which is still over here.
Yeah, I know. Got it.
And the cinnamon. So a teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, which is about that much. It's not very much. That's all you need. Now, you can truly measure if you want to. I'm doing this enough that I know that 1/8 of a teaspoon is just a little bit, but you don't need a lot of salt. The idea of just adding the salt to it is to bring the sweetness out because you really want the sweetness. All right, so you mix those together. It's like cinnamon sugar with a kick. The kick being the salt. And a tablespoon of water, yeah. All right, so then what you do is you take that mixture and you pour it all over the rhubarb. Make sure you get down into those interstices because you want it to coat the whole shebang. Then what you're going to do
This is 1 tablespoon.
is add the tablespoon of water to it because what you want it to coat everything. And the rhubarb may or may not be wet.
We are done with this.
Yes, and this. All right, so then what you do is you mix the whole thing. Because like I said, you want this stuff to be coated everywhere on every piece of rhubarb. Otherwise, life is going to be very sour. All right, so it looks kind of like wet sugar coated stuff. That's what it should look like. If it looks like this, you've succeeded. All right. So then what you do is you put the rhubarb over this. Now you don't want to pour it, like drop it in there, because then it'll dig through your crust. So you kind of want to put it in here kind of gently. Doesn't have to be perfect because you want to spread it out a little bit, but you kind of want to put it in there on the gentle side. Otherwise you will have holes in your crust on the bottom. Not that that's a bad thing.
It might make it stick.
Yeah, but you kind of want to just gently make sure everything is in every. Get back here. Look at you trying to escape again. And make sure to scrape the sides of the bowl because you'll want all that extra sweetness to go with it. On top of that, you're going to pat the remaining oatmeal mixture that we made the bottom crust. I don't pat it. I just kind of grab handfuls and kind of do this sort of thing. Because it's kind of that whole idea of making a pie or a bar. And the nice thing is once you do the majority of it, you can kind of just look and see where there are holes and fill in the holes. Ta-da! There you go. Okay, this is what it should more or less look like in the end. Just kind of, covered with the goodness of the sugar, spices, and oatmeal, and a little bit of flour. Then what you do is you throw this thing in, baking it at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 degrees Celsius, and for 45 minutes. And I think that's how we do it here too. It's 45 minutes. I think we don't do any extra. I think it works just fine. Now remember, this thing has the vegetable itself has a lot of water in it. It's kind of a water-based vegetable. So when you put it with all the goodies, it is going to be bubbly like a pie. That's just fine. You want that because it too will absorb some of that sweetness into it. All right, so we'll throw this in for 45 minutes. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot the last little thing then. Well, throw it in for 45 minutes.
Do you want me to change it?
No, that's good. No. 45 minutes and it'll come out and we'll show you what it looks like, and my mouth is already watering. Yum! See you soon. So there you have it. Again, it's gonna be very, very hot, and you can see it's kind of bubbling. And the butter makes the crust, kind of glues it together. But all the water that's in the rhubarb gives it a delicious sauce. So, is what?
It is yummy looking.
Yeah, and it is essentially kind of like just it's a sweet rhubarb cake or tart. It's going to be very, very tart. You're supposed to eat this with whipped cream. So, you know, it's kind of like you have the sweet tart cake part, and then you put the whipped cream on top. If you like sugar in your whipped cream, it would probably be good. I like it without sugar. So you get the creamy whipped cream, then you get the sweet of the cake, and then you get the tart of the rhubarb. Oh, so good. So that's what it is. And it looks like it worked really well with the gluten-free flour.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Which means the Muirlets can eat it, which is the big thing. Because we often have to change how we do stuff. All right. So that's basically rhubarb crunch, and we will show you what it looks like on a plate when it's cooled down. Right now it's very hot, so we're not going to cut it into it quite yet. But oh, it smells so good. Garden fresh rhubarb too. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. It's been a long time, but now summer's revving up, so we should be able to have more recipes coming out a little faster. So, yeah, happy making, happy baking, happy eating, and happy reading. Thanks for joining us.